The committee asked me to give a quick update on seed quality and quantity for this planting season. In Georgia, our certified, is that better, John? All right, thank you. In Georgia, our certified acres decreased in 2018, but that's not surprising. We had a record number of acres in certified production in 2017. 2017, we had 147,000 acres, which was the highest number we'd ever had. So I was down to 121,000 last year in certification, which is probably where we needed to be. Overall, we had a good season in terms of our inspection process. Typically, with one variety dominating the market, such as Georgia 06G, it's about 88% of our acres. The only major problems we have are problems of isolation. One variety planted next to another without an isolation strip or a barrier that's defined. So those typically are the only reasons overall where we may have rejected acres. We sometimes have rejected acres due to nut sedge, but that's pretty rare. We completed our field inspections in September, and then we went out and started going to buying points and visiting with all those folks in the fall. Certainly there were challenges there due to the hurricane, and we'll address that here in a minute. But we got all those facilities inspected. Ended up looking at a lot of additional warehouses, trying to find storage where we had problems due to the storm. And right now our folks are in the process of visiting the shellers and treaters as we get into that season where they start running the seed. As I mentioned, Georgia 06G continues to dominate the market, but we did see those second, third, and fourth places kind of flip-flop a little bit this year. 06 was at 107,000 acres applied for in Georgia. Also coming up there, Georgia 09D continues to tick up a little bit at 4,000 acres. 297 out of Florida was at almost 2,000 for us. And then you see kind of the lay of the land on the others. To Bob Kimwright's point earlier, there are a lot of varieties available. If you want to try some of these varieties that are produced in much smaller number of acres, I would just encourage you to make contact with your company representatives as soon as you can, because if those varieties are desirable, if folks do want them, you see the small amount of seed that's going to be available, you need to get your name in there and get on the list. To the real gist of why I'm here today to talk about quality and quantity. Overall, we think seed quantity is going to be sufficient. More certified seed acres are planted every year than we will ever need for planting. And the reason for that is because you got to make sure you're covered. The seed companies have to make sure that they're going to have good lots available to save for seed. So on average, it may be as much as 50, 60% more acres are planted for seed than are need to be saved. And that's a good thing, especially when you consider years like we had last year. The other good thing for us in relation to the hurricane last year, certified seed acres typically are planted earlier in the season, and so they come off earlier, and so that helped us out in terms of getting those seed, getting those peanuts out of the field and into the warehouse, and most were harvested and that were going to be saved for seed prior to Hurricane Michael. As you might expect, we get to this time of year, we start staying in close contact with our state seed lab, and we are very fortunate here in Georgia to have the lab that we have that's funded through the Georgia Department of Agriculture. Terry Hollifield, my boss, is going to give you an update from the lab in just a minute. But in talking with Dee Dee Smith, who's the lab director, overall, seed quality looks good. Most of the lots are in the high 80s and 90s. Now, given the fact that we had the storm last year, there were some warehouses that were damaged, there were some peanuts that got stored wet. Some of those lots are showing Aspergillus flavus or A. flavus mold. That's to be expected. We have some A. flavus in some lots every year. But again, that's why the seed companies plant many more acres than they're actually going to need for seed, for exactly this reason, so they can do those preliminary germs and pick and choose and select the best lots, which will be safe for seed. Overall, as I said, the germinations are high and vigor looks good on the peanuts that had no damage. The peanuts that did have damage, they're going to be, a concern. But again, that's why we go through this process, and those will be moved to the commercial market. Overall, the lab staff feels good about quality right now, and that's great to hear. I'm sure we'll come through this, and our seed companies and folks, they certainly don't want to sell seed that's not of high quality, and we're working with them, lab's working with them. We're going to make sure that only the best seed gets saved. Got to do a real quick plug for why purchase certified seed. We know there's more farmer safe seed out there than we probably first thought a few years ago. We know that that is a choice that you have to make with the PVP laws the way they're stated. But we also feel that certified seed gives you an advantage. You're never more than 2 generations from foundation class seed. All these fields are inspected for purity and freedom of noxious weeds. The facilities are inspected and monitored. We know that those activities are being done correctly. All this seed is going to the state lab or another approved lab for testing. So any seed that's sold is going to meet our standards for germination and purity. In essence, we monitor this seed. We start working with the companies before it's planted, during the planting season, prior to harvest. We're doing inspections. We're in the buying points. We're in those facilities. We're trying to make sure at Georgia Crop Improvement we give you the best quality seed possible.